Hello and welcome to today's Tidings. I'm your host, Joyce Tumia. My guests today are two very wonderful, very talented Downers Grove writers, Larry Zeller and Fred Meek. And we're going to start by letting them share some background information on themselves, and then we will get down to talking about writing and even sharing some samples of their work. Who would like to start and share some background information? How long you've been in town, anything else you'd like to share? Your career?
Well, I've been here about 32 years.
Okay.
Prior to that, I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for about the same amount of time.
Really?
And we've lived in the same place since then, which is not really in Downers Grove. It's just in the unincorporated area down south. And I have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. Nice. And I love them all.
Okay. Would you like to tell us what your career was, or?
Oh, I was a public relations counselor, and I was a magazine editor too. I started out in the Pentagon writing speeches in the '60s, and eventually ended up with public relations firms. While I was in Washington, I've always been somewhat associated with regulatory matters and legislative matters, although not really a lobbyist in that sense. But even when I was here, then I moved here to Chicago, and even there I have been associated with regulatory matters and that sort of thing.
So your writing was nonfiction at that point?
My writing was, I wrote for other people, and that's one reason why now I'd like to write for myself.
Okay, and we will
put my own name on it. Fred can tell you I always put my name very large.
Sounds good. Okay, Fred, what background information would you like to share?
Oh, let's see. I've lived in Downers Grove since 1971. Grew up in the Clarendon Hills and born in Chicago, so this is my territory, I guess. I've retired from a career in banking and law, and I've always enjoyed reading good stories. I've dabbled in over the years trying to write my own without much success, but since I've retired, I've tried to really learn the craft. I think I'm getting better at it, but
definitely
whether or not I'm good is something yet to be determined, I think.
My opinion counts for something. I say you are both very good. You are both very good.
Oh, thank you.
To whatever extent my opinion counts.
It's been one of the surprising things to me. I mean, I was what we call a production writer. I wrote nearly every day for 40 or 50 years, and when I started writing fiction, although I had dabbled in it before, like Fred, but I thought I really already knew how to write. And I've found there's just a whole lot to the craft, and a lot of it is I've learned from the writers group that we both belong to, the Writers Workshop.
The Downers Grove Area Writers Workshop, which at present is not meeting at the Downers Grove Library, where it would normally meet the second and fourth Monday of the month in the main meeting room at 7 p.m., but is currently meeting at Barnes & Noble at Oak Brook.
That's right.
And people can find out about it through the library website, though, and that way they will find out where the group is meeting at present and when it will be back in the library, right?
That's right.
Got it. Okay, and it's a very good group of people.
It is.
And good writers.
Some of the nicest people I have met, frankly, a really, really pleasant group.
Okay. And as far as the writing then, okay, when you ended up in a job that involved writing, had you majored in English or journalism, or?
I had majored in English.
Okay.
And I think I wanted to be a writer of fiction from the time I was about a freshman in college when I first discovered it.
All right.
But I went in the Army, and I continued to take courses. And then when I got out, I needed a job, and I got married, and I had a child. And I worked on my master's. The idea was that when I finished my master's, I would teach
English
and in college and write. That was my great ambition. So then there was a sort of 40-year hiatus while I raised a family and did all those things, and then when I retired, I'm back at it.
Great, great. Okay, and we'll get to the kinds of things you write in a minute. Fred, did you always want to be a writer? I know you've always been interested in history, and in particular ancient Roman history, ancient history.
I took Latin in high school, Joyce, and that intrigued me as to the people of the ancient world. Mm-hmm. The Romans and, of course, the Greeks before them, the Egyptian civilization. That piqued my interest in history. Mm-hmm. So I got my bachelor's degree in history, went on to law school. Like Larry, I've done a lot of nonfiction writing, that most of which was dreadfully dry. And one of the most difficult things I'm trying to learn is to stop writing like a lawyer and write like a good fiction writer.
Okay. But at what point did you decide you wanted to write as opposed to just reading about history and the things that interested you? What made you decide, wait a minute, these are good stories, I'd like to write some myself like this, or I can do better than this, or whatever it was?
That's hard to say, because I've always, even as a little kid, I'd fiddle around trying to write a scene, most of which was just pure imitation of something I'd seen on TV.
Okay.
I remember in 5th grade having written some short stories just to amuse my classmates.
Okay. Were they ancient Rome or Greece?
No. They very
really
contemporary for 10-year-olds.
Okay.
So I've, as I say, I dabbled in it. I did manage to complete a novel that I started in the 80s and maybe finished in the 90s. It's in a bottom of a drawer, safe from the light of day, and it's going to stay there.
Okay. Well, sometimes we are mistaken about our own work, and someone else looking at it might decide it's brilliant.
I don't think so. I think the pattern is, and from what I understand, it takes probably close to 1 million words of fiction writing to really... Before
you get up to speed, as it were, with...
To really put together something that is sellable, at least.
Okay. And do you want to kind of list other works that you've done? We can get into more about the actual writing process, but maybe just mention other things you've done, and then Larry can share what all he has written, from poems to short stories and whatever else.
The first book I published was called The College. It's a story about the Vatican, contemporary. The log line, I suppose, is that a questionable election by the College of Cardinals produces a most unlikely pope.
It's a wonderful book.
Well, thank you. But as I say, my fascination with history has kind of pushed me to particularly to read the works of Stephen Saylor and Robert Harris, and to give a shot at trying to write my own version of that sort of thing.
Okay,
and that's what Finis Republicae is.
Okay, you should hold it up. It's your book, but I have a copy, of course, signed by the author, and have to admit it is very impressive because so much research went into this. It is mind-boggling, even coming up with names for all the characters. I'm just overwhelmed.
Well, a number of the characters are actual historical personages.
So a few you didn't have to make up.
So a few I didn't have to make up.
Right, no. But the rest, and to have them be period names.
And it's particularly difficult because the ancient Romans were surprisingly unimaginative when it came to first names.
Okay.
Gaius, Marcus, Lucius,
Sulla.
Just about it.
Okay.
Publius. There just weren't a lot of first names certainly available, so I had to stretch it a little bit in places to avoid confusing the reader with too many
Too many
names that were too similar.
Right.
And
That
I
is
think
one
that's
of my
still
pet
a
peeves
problem.
with authors, when
Yeah.
they will have so many similar names or names that keep being mentioned. Well, it might be a male and a female, but there might still be letters in common, and it just gets very confusing. Anyway, especially if you want to read really fast and you're not reading as carefully as you could be. We'll get back to this because I know you you have an excerpt of it that you would like to read that I would like to have you read. So we'll get back to that. But let's let Larry tell us what your list of accomplishments writing-wise is and the different genres that you write in.
Well, I wanted to, I mean, I really admire what Fred does, because it is, as you say, just an enormous amount of knowledge and
Yeah.
history. And I also, I wanted to comment on what you said about names, because that's where the Writers' Workshop has been very valuable to me, because a lot of things you don't see, repetition, whether it be repetition of words or names, having a group that's really interested in you and really interested in, the way the workshop works is that we meet twice a month, and we have a little website which we put where the members can put their pieces up that they have volunteered. We usually have 3 volunteers who are going to read each session, and at the end of that, and then we can all download them and print them out, and spend a lot of time reading them and writing in the margins and telling people what we think. And then in addition to that, the author also reads at the next meeting, reads that piece, each of those pieces. And we have oral, and we give them the copies that we've written, and in addition to which they have the oral criticism to go home with. It's very gentle, positive criticism, almost always, except for me. That's I have a reputation.
You as a critic, or you as the object of criticism?
Well, a little of both, I think.
And
But-
you're the one who did the website,
Yes, I did.
which is really a wonderful idea, because not everyone can attend every time, and then people would show up when, John is reading and they don't have a copy of John's work because they weren't at the last meeting when it was
Yeah.
handed out. But this way they can just go online and get it and be prepared.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the discussion part is really, or reading it aloud and then having a discussion is really helpful too, because no one person is going to view everything in that work the same way as every other person there. So, and it's for everyone listening to learn as well. It's not just for the author. So you too may say things that I haven't thought of that I will hopefully agree with and say, that's true, that's very important. I'm glad you brought that up because I might not have seen that. And then I can still use the same information for when I'm writing, trying to keep it in mind. So it works in a lot of different levels.
Yes.
And it was enormously helpful to me in putting together Phoenix. Not only do we have a number of very good, talented writers in the group, we have several really good critics. And joking aside, Larry is one of them.
Definitely.
He's knowledgeable about the craft of writing, and he shares that knowledge generously with the people who are presenting material.
He does. He does. I will corroborate that. Okay. Well, and would you like to, again, tell us the kinds of things you read and maybe read one of them? Start out with you. And then
like
we'll
Fred, I have a novel in the bottom drawer and some poetry and short stories that I wrote over the years. But I think the problem with writing, especially when your job is writing, is you come home and it's very difficult to push yourself to write. And even if you do, I mean, the biggest thing I've learned since I've retired and really concentrated on this is a draft is a draft, and the writing really comes into rewriting. And so I have, since I've been retired, I guess 12 years now, or 13 years, I've written 2 novels and started on a 3rd one. And I've written a lot of poetry, and which I enjoy, and short stories. And I write a lot. I started out writing a lot about my where I grew up, which was along the Ohio River. It was a very rural community, sort of right across the river from Wheeling, West Virginia.
With a lot of local color.
Yeah, and some of it is kind of tales, and others. I wrote the first novel I wrote was sort of about Wheeling, because Wheeling's always been an interesting city to me. It's 50 miles from Pittsburgh, and so it's sort of where the hillbillies and the coal miners and the all meet, and so and there's been a lot of corruption there over the years, because West Virginia was a blue state for many years, and didn't have liquor long after Prohibition, legal liquor.
Okay. Nice
So
distinction.
I wrote kind of a saga of that, and then my second novel, which I'm actually now working on a complete rewrite, was based on my Army experiences. I was in the Army Security Agency, which are the cryptographers, and I was in the 50s when there was not much going on. It was a peacetime Army, and I was actually the newspaper editor on post, which is an interesting thing to do on a high security post. Nobody wants you to publish anything. But I learned a lot about the history of that post, and it's about 50 miles outside of Washington, and it had actually been a farm. It still looks like a farm. It had the silo and the barn, and that was for camouflage. But it was a central post for cryptological and code breaking, both training and the actual work during World War II. And
Sounds pretty interesting.
yeah, so I've written a kind of a spy novel about that.
Okay.
I think, and I have an interest in history too. Of course, mine is much more. What I'm writing about is much more contemporary history. But even so, Fred makes a real effort to be a historical novelist.
Yeah.
I use history to write fiction, and
okay.
I don't, and that's why I admire what he does, because he really tries to, and I couldn't write within those strictures. I have to, because, you still have to create all the scenes and the interest and the emotion, but you have to stay within what actually happened.
Right.
And
yeah.
I couldn't do that. I have to write disclaimers.
Okay. Okay. Did you bring an excerpt of the novel you're working on, the one you just
No, I have not.
Okay,
I've
well, read
just
us
started.
at home, and then we'll hear an excerpt from your novel. Want to make sure we get that in.
The first one I have is change. Every once in a while I learn something, nothing stupendous, but some small bit of wisdom, like taking the time to do something right, knowing when to keep my mouth shut and when not to, thinking of someone else first, knowing that I don't know, understanding that I'm not important, being quiet so that I can hear God speak. Not that I've learned all this forever, but when I see one little step forward, some little thing that I vowed so many times to never do again, and always do, and suffer the consequences, then the opportunity to screw it up once more comes up, and the temptation to jump again occurs, and I don't. I realize I've done it right this time. I've learned, maybe even changed. I don't know why this time, after I've hurt myself and others countless times. It can only be grace.
Oh, that is very nice. You write humorous things, and you write very touching things, and your work covers the gamut.
Yes.
That is very, very nice.
Thank you.
Now, I know you have a longer excerpt, but maybe you can read that, and then we'll get back to some of yours. That would
Sure.
be very nice.
Be happy to.
And then I know we might want to at least touch on things like publishing and self-publishing versus whatever. We'll see what time we have left, but I think sharing some of your work is very important.
Okay. This is from early on in the story. Finis Republicae is a novel about the first civil war in ancient Rome that started in 83 BC and ended in 82 BC. The main characters are the protagonist is Marcus Viatores. This scene involves him, his father Titus, his mother Lucia, and his sister Vespania, and it takes place in the kitchen of their home in Gabii, a village about 12 miles outside of Rome, and near the farm that their farm. Up to this point, there's been conversation between the family members about Titus's re-election as treasurer of the Comitia Tributa, which was a legislative body in ancient Rome. And he's being challenged for re-election, and he's concerned about losing. Marcus was about to make a comment when they heard shouts from the street just outside the house, right beneath the window. As they looked up, 2 fist-sized rocks flew through the opening and crashed into the shelf on the far wall, knocking it down and breaking the crockery that had been stored there. They heard 2 or 3 men yelling, "Titus Viatores, Aversor, Depiculator." Both women cowered against the wall beneath the window. Vespania covered her mother with her own body. Marcus and Titus leapt to their feet, Titus running to the entrance at the front of the house, and Marcus to the bedroom. He pulled his gladius from the scabbard and ran to catch up with his father already outside. As Marcus emerged in the morning light, he saw his father confronting 3 young men, boys really, who continued to shout their charges of embezzler, plunderer, at him from only a few feet away. Each held another stone, apparently ready to hurl them at Titus. They were laughing and taunting him. Their attitude changed when they saw Marcus gripping his sword and charging at them. They all dropped the rocks, turned, and ran down the narrow street, 2 of the boys more swiftly than the third. The faces of the neighbors appeared in barely open doors as Marcus caught up to the laggard and shoved him from behind. The young man sprawled face down on the paving stones. Marcus grabbed the boy's hair and pulled him to his feet. His nose was bloody, and his eyes darted from side to side, his mouth working soundlessly. Grabbing the front of the youngster's tunic, Marcus pushed him hard against the wall of the nearby house. He placed the tip of his gladius on the boy's belly and put light pressure on it. The boy tried to back away, but he was pinned tightly. "I know you," said Marcus, breathing hard, not from exertion, but from anger. "You were at the party. You were our guest. How would you do such a thing?" He pushed the sword a little harder. "It wasn't my idea," the boy managed to whimper. Blood and saliva ran from his mouth now. Tears streaked his cheeks. "If not yours, whose then?" "I can't tell you. He'll hurt me." "I'll open you up like the Trojan pig, you whelp. Tell me." A small red flower bloomed on the tunic under the sword tip. "Portius, Brutus Portius told us to do it. He paid us." Marcus lowered his weapon, grabbed the boy by the hair again, and marched him back up the tight street to the Viatores' house. More faces emerged. A few men stepped out of their houses. Vespania and Lucia were standing next to Titus, who was staring at the wall beneath the kitchen window. As Marcus approached, they stepped aside, and he could see the crude graffiti. Aversor, embezzler, had been scratched into the stucco in large letters. Neighbors, having heard the commotion, were now coming out of their homes as well. "Did you do that?" Marcus spoke loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. No, my friend Bulba did that. He can't spell very well. He left out the R." "Who put you up to this? Tell us all, boy." "Brutus Portius. Brutus paid us to each 2 asks to write that." "Did he tell you to throw the rocks through the window, too?" "No, that was Bulba's idea. He said he wanted to cause a stir and get everyone to see it. Please, let me go." Marcus did not release him. Instead, he pushed the young man to the wall and smashed his face into the lettering. Then he dropped the boy and walked away, satisfied with the bloody smear on the graffiti.
Wonderful. We're going to stop there because we're running out of time.
Okay.
That was a good spot to end, I think, as I recall, from having read it again today
Okay.
to keep it fresh. And it was a good excerpt
Sorry,
because it wasn't
didn't
part
mean
of the
to
letter.
overdo it.
No. It's just that we've been talking about a lot of other things, and I want to
Okay.
make sure we get to hear at least one more poem.
I do too.
So,
Well, I'll do another short one.
okay. It was a good excerpt.
This is called Transience. Bees lived within my wall, streaming in and out, a hole they'd found all day, busily going about their collective duties, not welcome honeybees, but cursed yellow jackets, pests with no good purpose. At night, though, when I lay beside them huddled together, only sheetrock between me and their thousands, softly roaring and silent, like halting breaths drawn into the lungs. They are a presence, that is the hum of life, moving against each other, grumblingly comforted by the crowded proximity. A lesson in compassionate kinship until the first frost, when their sudden silence is a reminder of the transience of life.
Very nice. That was very philosophical and had
And
some
you
nice
know,
visuals.
Joyce, another one of the benefits of the workshop is we have a lot of different genres. We have poets and novelists and short story writers. But one of the things I'm trying to learn to do is include that kind of lovely
Imagery.
poetic description in my prose.
And it is lovely and poetic.
Thank you.
It's very nice. Okay.
Sometimes.
Well, we have a couple of minutes left. We can talk very, very quickly about other benefits of the Writers' Workshop, or what question did you not get asked that you might normally get asked, like where do you get your ideas, or is self-publishing more legitimatized now than it has been in the past, or just as bad? I don't know.
Well, and I think that's the Writers' Workshop is a good place to learn about that, because we have people who have published with commercial publishers, all the way down to people who, like me, who don't want to publish. And
Okay.
I'm too old to be in the, as our other oldster John Quinn says, I'm too old to be in the publishing business. And it is a business, and you have to be that way. But
Right.
we have, like Fred, we have several people who have gone through the experience of self-publishing, and some of whom try to market aggressively, or who have their books in Anderson's bookstore and on Amazon. And
And I do want to make the point that self-publishing is not, as you were saying, some people don't want to publish at all or worry about it. But on the other hand, those who want to go through that are not necessarily doing it because their work wouldn't be accepted by a regular publisher. Lee Williams and John Payne and the two of you and John Quinn, you're all good examples. There are many good examples. So we can put information in the website, and they can know how to get your books and how to go to a Writers' Workshop meeting and talk more and learn more.
sure.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing all of this wonderful information and for reading those wonderful, wonderful pieces.
Well,
They were
thank you
really
so
good.
much for inviting us,
Yes,
Joyce.
thank you.
Thank you for coming. And good luck with your writing. I hope to get back to a meeting sometime. Thank you for watching. Please join me again for future episodes of Today's Tidings.